All right, welcome everyone. We would like to thank you for joining today's session titled Synergizing Best Practices, Student Advocacy, and Open Education. We would like to remind you that the conference code of conduct is still in effect for this session. And now I'll go ahead and turn it over to our speaker.
Hi, everyone. Good to meet y'all. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Monica, and I am a research associate at ISKME, which stands for the Institute of the Study of Knowledge Management in Education. And if you're not as familiar with what ISKME does, it is a nonprofit that really embraces open education. We've been doing research and a lot of work over the past decades, and I think you might have heard of the OER Commons digital library. So that's the huge database of open education resources. So definitely check that out. Yeah, so that's a little bit about it's me, but today I'm going to talk to you more about this research project that we just completed very recently. It's on student advocacy and open education, and sort of learning from the student advocacy side of things and best practices for open education. What's that noise in the, I'm not sure what that is, but okay. All right. So I did want to start off with a couple of quotes, and these are from the interviews that I did over the last few months. So the first one, our lessons are all open source. They are on our website. We usually submit them to the Clean Network, and they have their own curriculum review process. So this was from a student advocacy organization that does climate change, and they are churning out a lot of great content. But I think to them, open source was a shareable link on their website, and that's it. Students and educators can use it as and when they wish, but tracking wise, it is more difficult to figure out like who's actually using it, what happens to the curricula, and I'm seeing in these interviews that nonprofits generally don't know as much about open education or licensing processes. And then the next one was a student-led organization, actually. They said, we've partnered with another nonprofit to create 30 one-off lesson plans centering on the Asian American and NHPI community for a public database. So again, a lot of great work, a lot of outreach, but at the same time, how can it get to the right audience, the target users at the end? Yeah, so these are just ongoing challenges out there that student advocacy nonprofits are facing. So what I did want to dive deeper into today is, student advocacy, like it's a wide, it entails a wide range of activities. There's social, educational, community issues, all addressed through organized collective action. Youth are very involved in it. It fosters critical and creative thinking, the civic engagement, and they are, really engaged within their communities. But then also in open education, I mean, we're all here for the Open Ed conference. It's all about inclusivity and access. So how can we just mix these best practices from each other? Hold on. Yeah, this shows a snapshot of 30 participants that I spoke with. They work on so many different causes, from civic engagement, voter education, higher education, racial inequity, climate change, disabilities, and open education. There were a couple of nonprofits that I classified as philanthropy, meaning they provide funds, more like small grants, to other student advocacy nonprofits to do the work that they do. So a lot is happening in student advocacy now. A lot of these nonprofits, they do programs such as service learning, leadership development fellowships, media and political speaking opportunities, conferences and convenings for youth. A number of them have set up youth advisory boards, which means they meet regularly with youth who are at the center of this experience or the cause that they are focusing on to get youth experiences and feedback. And of course, ongoing workshops and training sessions. So there's a lot happening on the ground. And I'm going to share three big observations that I've seen happening, and then also talk a little more about issues that stem from it, and then where open education can kind of insert itself and also work in tandem with this. So one observation, I've mentioned from the quotes at the start, nonprofits create a lot of materials and resources in-house. There's a lot of content creation going on. And there might be remixing with other organizations. They share it within channels that they are more familiar with. And for a quote from one of our participants, they're trying to be really responsive to the people that they target. They're on the ground listening to youth. They're creating brand new training here and there because they want to improve on their strategies. So a lot of rich content is out there. Another observation, resources differ from state to state. This is not unexpected because of varying nature of states' policies. So for an organization that's targeting, say, speaking with government officials in California about a certain topic in healthcare, that's their deck or their talking points are going to look very different from when they speak with government officials in Texas, for example. The language that they use might be different. So the way that they are managing this could look somewhat ad hoc. Sometimes it's catered for a certain audience. They have to make sure that for a similar topic, this content is catered for another audience. So there's a lot going on in the back end too. And the third observation, nonprofits want to strengthen partnerships with the universities to change curricula and also just affect change in general. It has been quite difficult for nonprofits to, say, find connections with universities if they, are starting from scratch, or if they don't know anyone in the university network. There was a nonprofit that I spoke with that had some success over the years, but it took many, many years to really get, a foot in the door and really work super closely with a faculty member that was willing to, assist them in that process. And overall, they've integrated voter education into freshman seminars over time, and really co-designed with different campuses to make sure that the content is relevant, and that faculty members are also getting trained along the way. So this was a quote from one of them where now, their volunteers frequently stop by at a freshman seminar. They give the instructor materials. They're guiding the instructor on how, voter education can be implemented in a course setting, but information about it can be implemented in a course setting. So just these are a couple of main observations that I gathered from speaking to all these different nonprofits. So here, I tried to map a couple of issues that are emerging. First, there's lots of material. The second, on different messaging, it might be difficult to track with different audiences. The impact metrics could look different. And then on the last one, sometimes it's difficult to get these partnerships and connections started when it's limited. They have limited resources and time overall. So a major question that we've been thinking about is then how might student advocacy organizations and the open education community then collaborate to make content more relevant over time and just make it stay updated. We're realizing that student advocacy groups, they are often at the forefront of these very pressing issues. They're on the ground doing the work. And so members of the OE community have to also be there to reach out to these nonprofits to continuously create and refine and adapt open education resources so that these OER stay current, they're relevant, and they address emerging needs of the day. So a lot of topics that are discussed right now on the ground are like climate change, social justice, mental health. And then this collaboration would also ensure that educational materials are then aligned with real world concerns that connected to these evolving educational needs. And at the end of the day, it comes back to the students themselves. Like it's meaningful to the student who is involved in advocacy, but meaningful to the student in their educational experience. So my table again, I have a bridge icon because I see OE as like a bridge. So these are a few recommendations that ISME came up with. But actually, I would love to open the floor later to hear more of your insights also. So we have one on, direct student involvement in the creation and advocacy of open education. We've heard, I was at the um, presentation with 20mm Michelson Foundation earlier, and they hit, with a really big point that students sometimes don't know the impact of open education in just their lives. And, it's not just about free textbooks or paying less for a given book or content. It's a lot more than that. And it's about having agency, really creating their own education experience. Yes, there may be a lot of materials that are ongoing, but that is part of collating all this, making sure that channels that they are going to get to the right people, the right audiences at the end. And just educating students in general about like what that whole process is, that it even exists, and that they can do that not just on their own within a student org or just a small group, but with their faculty members, staff in their universities, librarians also. Sometimes librarians are overlooked when students, only think of like faculty members just because of day-to-day interactions. And next, also on supporting student orgs to include open education in their agenda. A lot of student orgs, they're focusing on issues like immigration, nutrition. I think that's all incredible, but every cause can be attached with open education. For the next on building and strengthening infrastructure, this is generally to support continuity and institutional knowledge. So it's student advocacy orgs, youth leaders, sometimes with the university, students graduate, or even at high school level, students graduate, there's a change of student leadership. There is that loss of institutional knowledge over time. And right now, I've spoken to a few nonprofits that say like, hey, we've been just tracking this on a spreadsheet. It's just shared to the next person who comes on board. And with every person that it's shared to, things get lost along the way over the years. So there has to be tools, networks, mentorship communities that really get more of this institutional knowledge together so that these resources can be tracked, different messaging, different connections and networks that the organization is associated with. Yeah. And then the last one on just partnerships with universities over time. One recommendation that we have is professionalizing advocacy and organizing. We're seeing sometimes that students go into it because, yes, they're very passionate about, something that is happening in the community, but they see it as a side project or an extracurricular, like something that they'll do for a while in college and then they'll graduate and do something else. But there's just so many skills that come with, advocacy and organizing that is so transferable into other areas, but itself as a profession. We're hearing a lot from nonprofits that do workshops on, how to set up a social media campaign, how to do marketing strategies. Similarly, like there has to be workshops on how do you incorporate open education into your agenda. Something like that, along with all these other workshops that are being done is equally important. And then the last couple of recommendations, these are more ongoing, like things that we have to just continue doing, like foster community, sustainable collaboration, making sure that it's not just on one end, one party to keep reaching out, because that's tiring also. But in the OE community, we can be reaching out to student advocacy nonprofits to widen our scope, but also to show that interest and make sure that just collaboration takes time to build with all these relationships. Yeah, I will pause here. So I have a couple more slides that I differentiated. It's the same recommendations, but I differentiated based on like student-centered recommendations and more like organization-centered recommendations. I'm happy to share my slides. And actually, we just completed writing our report. So, feel free to go to this short URL link or scan the QR code and read the full report. We have a lot more details there. We also have an appendix section where we created a rubric to guide organizations in evaluating where their student advocacy efforts are at. It's not per se, it's not like a rubric for like funders only, but it can be viewed upon as like a rubric where you can self-evaluate, like, oh, I'm at this level, and there are nonprofits who have been a lot more advanced in another area, and we can like learn from them in terms of the criteria that they use to get there. Yeah. So thanks for listening, but I want to give it a few more minutes to open up for discussion. I would love to hear, your opinions, experiences. Yeah. And if you don't have questions, I have questions for you. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Like, who are you especially trying to help? So, like, we're a nonprofit, we're doing work with OER in Africa, in community centers, in some schools, with government entities, different people like that. And so the context definitely is different than, say, working in Rhode Island with, higher ed. Is that something that you also provide advisement toward, or like what's your specialty, and where could you direct us for similar kinds of assistance?
Yeah. Are you asking more about the nonprofit like ISKME itself, where I'm at? Yeah. I would say I think most of our partners have been in the US so far, but I think there is definitely opportunities to do international work. Actually, our founder is sitting right there, Lisa. And I mean, like Lisa, you could also answer her question. Yeah.
The mic is coming.
In terms of our OER work, it's actually quite international. We do a lot of work with UNESCO and member states of UNESCO in different parts of the world. In terms of the student advocacy work, this project was very US focused and was looking very specifically, and the data is in the report there that you can have the code for. The data were very specifically looking at what kind of student, what were the sort of the characteristics of student advocacy here, and what is that, where is the opportunity to sort of transfer those or to bring those into the OER space. So in OER, what could we learn from student advocacy more generally to in fact help the field of accelerate OER? So from that perspective, the rubric is, I think, very interesting, but know that the data that we're drawing from on this, we're all US specific, US based.
West Africa, where we're working, the people who are creating OER and who are interested in OER are primarily the advocates. It's young people who find out about it, who then are campaigning for OER because they want to save money, they want current global relevant content, and they become both the advocates and then kind of the change agents who make it happen within institutions. So it's a very, I mean, we definitely want to learn from what has worked so far, because it's kind of the opposite. You're going to work through the advocates to go up and try to make institutional change, as opposed to the institutional change happening and then trying to come down and let the grassroots market it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective. And I think Lisa's already mentioned most of the data was US, but I think I can also see some similarities between youth like on the ground, grassroots. Yeah, thank you.
We had one question online. It
Okay,
says,
great.
in higher institutions and universities, we only have students for 4 to 5 years, with a high turnover rate in the student association and inconsistent student association buy-in. Any tips on sustaining student advocacy and support amid those challenges?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question and one that has come up multiple times in the interviews. So there was one on like a nonprofit that mentioned like, hey, there are staff members in the university that stay of course a lot longer, have a lot more institutional knowledge, and to really leverage their expertise in making sure that the right information is passed down, and student leaders are getting so that they don't start from scratch every time student leadership changes. But I think that is inevitable, that there is some loss in that sense along the way. But something that I heard that was particularly energizing, I felt, was I interviewed this, I think she was our youngest participant, and she said like, hey, there's so much technology out there, there's social media, like there's no stopping you connecting from a university alumni or even a high school alumni who had done something that's a few years ago, but you think it's still relevant. You go connect with yourself with them and talk about how things can be worked on in this present day. So there's social media. There is just a lot of other platforms to leverage and connect. So not necessarily that it would be viewed upon as loss over time, but more of like just evolution. Yeah. I know we're nearly at time, but I would love to, connect with more of you and listen to your opinions and stories. So yeah, please send me an email, say hi if you're in person. Oh, sure. Is this okay? I did have it in my folder. Let's see. Am I able to flip this screen to show a different? Okay, let me try doing it on Zoom. Oh, you can only show one thing. Okay, sorry, I'm not sure how this screen is connected to over there. Like, it is okay. If you go to the link that I mentioned and just scroll all the way down, it's at the end of the report. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not able to show it right now on this screen. Yeah.
All right, so we're at time.
Yeah.
We want to thank our speaker for being